I've had many names, names sounding like a whisper in the wind, names deep and rooty like the earth, but now I am nameless. Watch me. I too have felt the relentless itch of the West, sat in the shadow of a mountain as family after family crossed this barren earth. I've heard prayers, some to the land, some to a god, and listened as nothing but wind and dust responded. I was in the broken creosote and cracked stone left by a railroad as its metal rungs tattooed graphic lines of ownership across this landscape. I have felt the tug of extraction in my bones, the ripping of ore from the earth, the pounding of metal on stone, for I am of this land, and this land is of me. They come first to survey the land, marking space with flags and metal stakes, laying claim to the earth. Then the diggers arrive, giant monsters with metal teeth, hungry for destruction, filling gaping holes with gray concrete. A crane with a giraffe's length for a neck erects a smokestack, so tall it catches clouds in its metallic embrace. A sign hammered deep into the ground reads Hidalgo Copper Smelter, a Phelps Dodge Corporation. I watch as a line of hot black tarmac forms a route towards the silhouette of a town in the distance. Like a footprint Plias, New Mexico is pressed into the earth. It smells of fresh paint and burnt wood. Identical houses on identical streets mirror a suburban landscape. Water is piped in from miles away to feed newly planted grass in sloping front yards. I decide to linger here a while. I have seen life fill this landscape, blotting out the plumes of smoke which rise from the copper smelter, muting the ragged coughs of men and women. I have been privy to moments of quiet exhaustion and noisy joy which fill the suburban streets of Plias. Observed a community expand, shift forms, shrink. Felt the frustration of men and women trapped by a life tied to the rise and fall of copper stock and job insecurity. For this is part of the American legacy, land and sky and red, red dust. I've had many names, names sounding like a whisper in the wind, names deep and rooty like the earth, but now I am nameless. Watch me. I too have felt the relentless itch of the West, sat in the shadow of a mountain as family after family crossed this barren earth. I've heard prayers, some to the land, some to a god, and listened as nothing but wind and dust responded. I was in the broken creosote and cracked stone left by a railroad as its metal rungs tattooed graphic lines of ownership across this landscape. I have felt the tug of extraction in my bones, the ripping of ore from the earth, the pounding of metal on stone, for I am of this land, and this land is of me. They come first to survey the land, marking space with flags and metal stakes, laying claim to the earth. Then the diggers arrive, giant monsters with metal teeth, hungry for destruction, filling gaping holes with gray concrete. A crane with a giraffe's length for a neck erects a smokestack, so tall it catches clouds in its metallic embrace. A sign hammered deep into the ground reads Hidalgo Copper Smelter, a Phelps Dogs Corporation. I watch as a line of hot black tarmac forms a route towards the silhouette of a town in the distance. Like a footprint Plias, New Mexico is pressed into the earth. It smells of fresh paint and burnt wood. Identical houses on identical streets mirror a suburban landscape. Water is piped in from miles away to feed newly planted grass in sloping front yards. I decide to linger here a while. I have seen life fill this landscape, blotting out the plumes of smoke which rise from the copper smelter, muting the ragged coughs of men and women. I have been privy to moments of quiet exhaustion and noisy joy which fill the suburban streets of Plias. Observed a community expand, shift forms, shrink. Felt the frustration of men and women trapped by a life tied to the rise and fall of copper stock and job insecurity. For this is part of the American legacy: land and sky and red, red dust.
There was a lot to get right. I wanted the building to resonate with the building, not just in terms of appearance, but also in terms of form and impact. It just needed to stand on its own. It felt like it was sliding down the river below. It did not look like one piece. The building was at one moment just solid and rigid, and now it seemed to start sliding towards something solid, yet still moving in various directions. Then the slope of the building was different. I felt the building at different points. It was moving and shifting back and forth. The building went through a series of changes and transformations. Some people think that everything in London is just flowing and falling and changing shape, and there seems to be no way of getting it right. But then, there it is. There is change and motion at its core. So what is the point of the site? After all, what's the point of a site but to be able to present the information you need? To present what you need to present? It's the same in other places and in this project. So really, it's a tool for my own self-definition. So there, let me help you discover what is in front of you. It says, the door is wide open. Don't go through it. Don't step in. We don't want to turn down anyone in life. We won't stop there. We want to be part of the story. It doesn't matter which door you go into if there's a good story to tell. If there isn't, then we won't. We want to tell the story we've been told. My personality could be described as a mixture of all facets. I would say the one with the biggest influence is my ambition. It is my greatest attribute in terms of how I view other people. If someone is standing for something, then naturally they're going to be the best. I'm also very keen on positivity, especially in terms of success. However many times I've tried to think of the negative consequences to what is coming. We're on the same island. The only difference being, we're not the only islanders. We've got two different cultures to meet in the form of our own culture. It's worth trying to make your words come closer, and at the same time be as natural as possible, to help you come to a clear and sensible conclusion. We all need advice, all of us. I feel a different approach will be needed. I should not be in my old role as presenter. I should be in the second video. I mean that as affectionate advice, a good thing to do if one was starting a new job or trying to do something new. On the whole, was it easy to put the pieces together? I mean, the pieces were easy to put together at first, but then they kind of flicked around and went crazy. My phone was too far away from them to get a good picture. They were so far away that they didn't show up. So that was a big challenge. I had it at arm's length from the outside, and from my point of view, they didn't even know the difference. All in all, it was a very slow, complicated process. So yeah, I don't know the future. Something she did, something she has been in an environment that allowed her to get to this point. It's been a while since I felt real for real. I've been living in my head all day, staring at images where things are real and I cannot find the words to describe them. I won't ever get over this one. This time it's finished. I've done the very simplest of things. To do it over again, I'm sure, would be to destroy this concept of time. It is simply too clear. I cannot explain it. It has nothing to do with time. It is time. I was in a hurry to do it the way it was supposed to be done. I don't want to make it a different way of doing things, only by changing the way things are done. That's what time has become. The first time that time was taken over, something like this was made. This was only the beginning. We need to move the ball. We need to shoot. The structure of the mind is now fully conscious. All those other things have come into the awareness at the beginning of the act. You might see it. I've never been one for the system. I've always been one for the idea of change. It has no place here, no place. The door slams shut, the shadows of the house slipping behind him. For this you will meet on your own soil, in a common dwelling. Your father was born in that place. We don't even need a government. The entrance to the dining room is located on the top floor of the tower. He says, you should never forget photography. It's not really a moment. It's a time capsule. So we'll never know the answer, or for that matter, the whole truth. All that can be said with certainty is, the young man will share his journey with the world. We too can look like a hero. We can act like heroes. We will look for other opportunities. Let us dance. The sun is shining. Let us run. Let us be the song. Let us be the dance. Let us all be one. He is one. We are one.
If you look the word up in the dictionary, you will find it means lay figure, and is of the masculine gender. But the dictionary is wrong. A mannequin is a good-looking, admirably formed young lady, whose mission is to dress herself in her employer's latest creations. The mannequin goes through this performance many times during the day. Of late, however, these young ladies have grown tired of their functions. No other candidates are coming forward to take their places. The mannequin goes through this performance many times during the day. Of late, however, these young ladies have grown tired of their functions. No other candidates are coming forward to take their places.
Today's society is so interweaved with digital spaces and objects. A large amount of once physical social interaction now takes place online, especially after the recent migration into the virtual due to the pandemic. So what then happens to fashion? The materialization of identity, style and personality? Will unknown forms of fashion transcend to these virtual means? Over the past year, I've undergone an investigation into the future of digital fashion. I've created my own future, answered my own questions. An example of a world where digital fashion is adopted by the public, how this affects society and raises questions about what it means to wear clothes. My world may be a speculation, but the objects and programs created are all real experiments I've made using new technologies, demonstrating how close this reality really is. I do believe this is an inevitable transition at some point in the future. Therefore, a lot of my project is investigating the requirements of this and the effects these objects can have. To portray this future, I produced 4 fashion magazines that ascend from now to 2024. Throughout the past year, I produced multiple digital fashion outcomes with various intentions that explore different speculations, all in hopes to investigate this industry through making and interacting. This speculation is then presented through the lens of a fashion magazine, as seen. The first 2 include more source data, articles and images, whereas the last are filled with more of my own work as this narrative forms. The magazines age from today because I wanted to contextualise the existing digital fashion industry, as my work is an adaptation of such, illustrating how we journeyed into this reality and how it may progress. In the first, I explore early examples of digital fashion and appearances accepted by society as normal. This then sets the tone for the further 3, in which I'm speculating the social adoption of this reality. This includes looking at how filters have changed how a generation expresses themselves. There are articles on Instagram filters and digital makeup artists in the field. And there's fashion designers creating digital products for games and online platforms. Their skills have naturally shifted to alternative forms online. The second publication becomes more focused on digital fashion through 3D rendered textiles. To illustrate the current market and how digital fashion is sold as a picture in 2D, giving ownership to the buyer. How there may be an emotional/personal disconnect from digital fashion when owning a form you can't interact with. Another theme throughout this scene shows how society and the virtual have already merged, and the real doesn't mean as much today. Miquela is a great example of this theory. Being a virtual influencer on Instagram, she has very real stances on politics, fashion and society, despite her lack of realness. The third and fourth scenes are filled with more of my own work, and to truly commit to this world-building experience, as society and fashion become more virtual, so do the magazines. The third presents the concepts of digital fashion for the environment. Some of my outcomes include a narrated environmental movement that uses digital fashion as activism and provides a no-waste solution. I also explore the use of augmented reality, becoming an alternative for fast fashion. And finally, adopted the design of a traditional loom to produce energy instead of fabric. This magazine is the furthest projected narrative. It explores the full social entanglement of digital fashion and the user, focusing on some key elements that I realised are essential for the future and adoption of this industry. These are that garments must encourage self-expression and an emotional connection with its user. Also that they must have the ability to be wearable and movable to lessen this disconnect created with difference in form. And so the cover garment is being worn live and responding to the user's movements. Underneath, they are accessorized with rendering tools such as a chrome ball for HDR light recording. Additionally, for self-expression, I have paired digital garments with an AI that can read facial expressions, whilst also narrating the use of an AI image simulator with garment designs to make appearances more personal. These magazines have become a device to contextualize digital fashion in use and allow me to speculate a possible future. Fashion is the projection of self or group or society. It is personality in objects and socializing through appearances. This has driven the objects I have produced to overcome the lack of connection with something you cannot touch. and possibly design digital garments with more expressive opportunity than was ever possible with material threads and fabrics. This is the future I envision.
The designer directly influences the designed. The designers of machine learning algorithms establish a hypothesis, a question to investigate. A parameter is set and variables are chosen. Data is then fed into these specified conditions. Each inch of clay is a human life, translated into a data set. They are reduced and abstracted into data points, quantitative or qualitative, a number or a label. They can only be limiting, as to enable the machine to compute and identify patterns. Aspects of one's life are extracted, taken out of context, resolution reduced. It starts off rough, a sketch of what it could be. The more data an algorithm is fed, the more refined it becomes. Training a machine learning algorithm requires an immense amount of data, and the industry is expanding more quickly than the world has data. And so, this data might not even be ethically or fairly sourced, as companies and researchers succumb to breaching data privacy laws or using simulated data. The technology recognizes patterns. Patterns are patterns, but it is important to remember that correlations are not causations. Algorithms have the ability to justify their own results, inferring their own meanings, creating a false reality. Their computing power is able to devastatingly amplify real-world systemic injustices with the utmost efficiency. It is the designer's responsibility to assess the results and feedback them into the next iteration. I push and prod the form's walls throughout its progress. This continuous interaction between the algorithm and its maker is crucial. These feedbacks, pushed by the researchers, are imperative to hone their algorithms, fine-tune, and come closer to becoming a reliable technology. One with a high confidence level. A great algorithm must have been fed immense data and gone through cycles of feedback, preparing them for any scenario, minimizing anomalies. Machines might not make mistakes, but these technologies are trained by humans who do. People have their biases and prejudices. The algorithm, who does not recognize the difference between good and bad, learns both from the decisions of their makers. It internalizes their inclinations, adopts their beliefs. Just like the brain, this artificial one is plastic, changing and adapting as a result of experience, or perhaps according to the data set it's fed. Neural network plasticity. Its malleability is mimicked in the clay, giving it the power to course correct and return to processing reliable rings of data. It is the learning in machine learning. However, when a program had been built atop a biased system, how would it ever be able to reflect the real world? When the misogyny, racism, and elitism is so rampant in our tech industries, how can we trust it to perform with just, as it decides our futures? Our job prospects, financial futures, political leanings, our healthcare, transportation, and education systems. We can't just slap patches on systemic inequality. When the foundation itself is fragile, things will collapse. The designer directly influences the designed. They have authorship over technologies that impacts communities. The algorithm assumes a flat plane, an equal, unbiased world devoid of gray. The algorithm, prone to so much bias, has to be designed with care and softness. The false absolute of numbers means that whatever that the algorithm outputs would have power over whole human lives. It will not listen and negotiate, individually take things into account. The technology is able to scale, multiply, amplify these false absolutes within seconds. It could be groundbreaking. It could be destructive. Its precarity is terrifying.
Hi, this is Harry Jinuksang, the creator of Homo Sapiens Digital. Homo Sapiens Digital is a project which imaginatively extends an era of present digital world through fashion. I believe fashion design is a field where stories, issues, and politics of our world exist and are actively reflected. For example, in the 70s, several historic events like energy crisis, oil crisis, and the inflation planted despair to the youths, which affected fashion between 70s and 80s. Punk fashion reflected to the vicious circle of the time. It was a silent resistance against traditional society and the dark side of the world, like discrimination and racism. The vision of youths becoming aliens of their society and having no foreseeable future was aggressively reflected as fashion genre. On the other hand, in the similar era, the Paul Schroeder look expressed a rising woman's socio-political status along the androcentric society. These are one of the points why I love fashion. Fashion are the closest objects that always stay around us, and therefore I believe it's a platform which can express not only the wearer's characteristics, but opinions, politics, philosophies, and etc. I believe Homo Sapiens Digital is also inspired by such fashion design's ideology, which reflects the issue and the atmosphere of the time. And then when we look into our world today, it is no exaggeration to say that now we coexist in the digital world. We work in there, we communicate, we play, we meet people in there. Although we do lots of things in there, there has been always some errors. I'm not talking about some kind of bugs or codes, software or computer viruses, but fundamental and infrastructural errors which comes when digital world is being delivered to analog world. It is something I call digital illness, or in technical term, computer vision syndrome. As the role of digital environment become more and more important along the fourth industrial revolution and pandemic, large number of people is now inevitably, unintentionally, and also unconsciously making use of the digital world through with display devices. The devices usually stay in a certain location when they are being used. For instance, phones are used in the palm of our hand, laptops are used on horizontal surfaces like desk, leg, or bed. Namely, the displays are located under the eye when they're being used, which means that they require people to adjust their viewing angle, which really makes the muscle around people's neck and back really tired. This is where computer vision syndrome, an error that brings unpleasant condition to everyone trying to exist in the digital world, begins to appear. The syndrome therefore causes headaches, blurred vision, neck pain, back pain, eye strain, dry eyes, dizziness, fatigue, and etc. With those research about factors and the syndrome I gathered, I try to speculate how fashion can possibly either prevent or celebrate the symptoms. In the matter of considering which fashion elements to design, I try to set open possibilities in the beginning. For instance, points like which symptoms can I speculate for the future scenario? What types of garments would suit the future scenario's concept? What kind of narrative can garments detail deliver? Which accessories can I apply to my fashion look, and so on. I thought the most applicable and noticeable symptom that can be applied to fashion design would be back and neck pain, as they occur on body parts. And both pains are caused by having bad postures, like hunching and stretching into certain directions. So I aggressively imagined an evolved human body by giving them permanently curved spinal structure and forwarded neck. This particular body structure therefore became a foundation where my garments can be constructed. Final visual of evolved human body therefore had its spine and neck noticeably extended into certain directions. I thought the evil body parts had to be visually observable in order to impress audiences in a glance and remind of the project's future scenario, celebrating and adapting to the dystopian digital world. The evolution also generated extra surface on the back and shoulder, which meant that garments also had to allow more comfort to the wearer. Therefore, I came up with design which can both show off the modified human body and also add additional activity range for the increased back surface. The opened back pattern lets the hunched spine to be seen while giving more comfortable wearability. The type of garment I decided to make was the tailored suit, since I thought it would be looking despairful when the evolution caused by dystopia cannot be or not being hidden even on the nicest clothing, which is the formal wear. So I had to think about design of inner layer, which is traditionally shirts, and the outer layer, which is usually the blazer. My final decision for the inner layer was to put the jersey and leggings with the stretchy fabric, so the design can flexibly adapt to modifying human body with its materiality. I was inspired by the computer boards for the color scheme of the inner layer, which are basic components where the digital world is constructed, and also the computer boards are actually inside the computer cases. I also tried to develop accessories for Homo sapiens digital. Items like choker or bracelets were in my initial development plan. The choker was also inspiring with not only with its visuals but also with the world itself, as I was going to imagine a future when digital world has dominated traditional human lifestyle. Choker seemed like a great type of accessory to connote the dystopian circumstance choking the world of the era with its technology. Bracelets had similar context as choker, of delivering visual of a person being locked in fetters. Unfortunately, the accessories are not included in the final outcome, as they felt like it's too much on the neck, arms, and legs of the suit, but it helped on designing the details of the garment. In case of details of the garment, I thought the look needed something which delivers narratives of future scenario. The key concepts they had to deliver was people's obsession from being disconnected from the great digital world, a limited access on digital devices while wearing a materials that is not friendly to digital devices, and lastly, the fact that people are celebrating the powerful digital world. So details like the brand label, located in the middle of the chest, is designed with inspiration from one of the digital aesthetics, the CPU. It also connotes that digital world of the future then became almost essential as the heart of human. You can also find some details in the buttons as well. There are engraved flat buttons with button cell-like graphics. The graphic is to reflect future humans' obsession on the electricity, which is one of the elements which supports existence of digital world. And lastly, there are embroidery in shape of fingerprints. The combination of digital usability and biomimicry aesthetic from the human body reflects the era of powerful digital world dominating and combining themselves with the traditional human civilization. As a result, I could crystallize the imagined human body and garments with details of digital aesthetics as the main elements of final fashion illustration and get started on making. As this was the first time of myself properly finishing a garment, I visited patterner and tailor when I was in Seoul so I can get help with pattern making and a proper sewing for my designs. And after finishing designing the pattern, I went out to look for a suitable fabric for my suit. So I went to the Dongdaemun market, which is one of the most biggest fashion supply market in Korea. I was flexibly considering the key color of my garment between green and burgundy, but I couldn't find a stretchy fabric with the exact green color I wanted. So I finalized my key color with burgundy fabric. After selecting fabrics, I could then cut out the patterns and finally assemble my garments and come back to London. After I came back and finished my quarantine, I listed down for places and workshops where I can get my garments detail finished. As a result, my button and CPU brand label were finished in the laser engraving workshop in Hatton Garden, and the rest of the things, such as embroidery and sublimation printing, could be finished in the design fabrication labs in the campus. I don't see this project is completely finished. There are still a variety of different evidences that computer vision syndrome can affect people's fashion, which can be the catalyst of speculating more future fashions. Also, there are more other errors from the digital world, which I see that might affect our future. And I believe the Homo sapiens digital can be developed from a single project to a fashion collection which periodically talk about ongoing factors of the time's digital world. On the other hand, with the latest fashion design for Homo sapiens digital, which is the ones you saw today, I wish it can evoke people with awareness, thoughts, and controversy about the dark potential of the digital world. Hope you enjoyed my creations, and please look forward to see the next Homo sapiens digitals. Harry Jinuk-sang here for an ideal world. Thank you for watching.
Hi, I'm Aarushi, and today I'm in conversation with Sam, and we're going to talk about archiving and digital space with respect to like both of our projects. So my project is called Sedition, and it acts as a growing archive on textile, where I record internet shutdowns in India district-wise. And I did this after analyzing open source data. And now I'm able to encode parameters such as the cause, the date, the location, and the kind of network affected into textile. But beyond an archive, my project also acts as a protest that can be unfurled in like a public space and performed. But yeah.
My project, Boğaziçi'den Sesler, which translates as Sounds from Boğaziçi, follows the appointment of a rector undemocratically at Boğaziçi University in Istanbul. This started on the 4th of January 2021 when I was back home. So I was quite close by to it, but yet unable to attend. So I've also been looking at kind of archiving in the digital space and what that looks like from a distance, as many other people were in the same situation as I due to, the pandemic and other things like that. I was looking a lot about kind of how to archive these kind of movements in real time, how protests can occupy digital space and how it's remembered. And I was working with sound as well as a little bit of, printing and moving material across from digital to physical space, but mostly sound, hence the name Sounds from Boğaziçi. So with Aarushi today, we're going to talk about 3 of each of our references that was part of our research for our respective projects. And then we're going to question each other about these references in relation to one another's projects.
Cool. So I'll start off with the first reference, which is something Sam used for his project. So it's called the Monument Counter, which is an online memo to commemorate women who have lost their lives due to domestic violence. This database is updated every day, and on clicking each name, you get further information, such as the date and the place that it occurred in. And I feel that this format of remembering someone is extremely powerful to collect all of these names and put them up on one space. And I clearly see the influence in your work when it comes to collective memory. And so in that description, they say that this memorial is to raise awareness about the alarming rates of domestic violence, and that as the counter goes up, hope vanishes. So I wanted to ask you what the format of your archive online aims to do, in the way that it's arranged.
Right. Yeah, so I think with the memorial counter, it's mostly collections of kind of names and then news articles. So it's like a growing list. Mine, because it's more about kind of the protest, it's the different kind of movement, and also protests that, there is also protests against women's domestic violence, and it's actually intertwined kind of a lot with some of what the Boğaziçi protest was about. But mine takes kind of a different form online, as it's, instead of tracking necessarily over the years, it's more kind of by different demands. So I've tried to structure the digital space in a way where instead of names, it kind of follows a hashtag or a chant. So primarily it's kind of organized by hashtag, but actually I organized more by the chants personally when I was building it. So I would kind of start with, because I was just going through many clips that were circulating and cutting up the sounds, and I would collect lots of different chants to see what the demands were, because when you hear all these voices at once demanding something, it's pretty powerful. And so I kind of wanted to use that as the starting point for an archive that would then, material would obviously fall under different labels, but there would be these kind of different chants that would be kind of the centers of gravity, I guess, in terms of how it was structured. So I guess, yeah, that's kind of how my archive intends to organize the material in the digital space, at least. Yeah, that's how I approached it.
Cool. With the chants, like, is it like different protests have different ones, or is it like you hear many of them because many protests are linked at like one protest?
Yeah, I think it's, well, with the there's different chants. Well, what's interesting for me when I was looking through them was there's some chants that are reminiscent of like older protests where they've just changed out one word or even two words. And that's kind of interesting to me because it builds like there's already like a inter-built kind of solidarity in the way that they're doing these things. Like they approach it, like they use a lot of chants that were used in Gezi like in 2014. And then what was interesting to me is with these chants, like when other protests happen, like since the Wazji thing started, other different protests have happened, and it's interesting to see, for me to see where those different chants might intersect, for example, or like different sounds, what might be in common. So even, I mean, there's part of it was in the Wazji one was like about kind of pride and like anti-homophobia, and then part of this there's called like the Purple Conference or something like that, which is I don't know how to translate to English, but Purple Conference, I think. And it's kind of like the Turkey pulled out of this like women's convention, which was aimed to like reduce domestic violence. So a lot of the protests are kind of shared, and there's a big overlap in chants. So there's a lot of kind of, because you know those two struggles are really closely linked. So yeah, I guess that's how I view it. I don't know if I answered the question, but basically, yeah,
Yeah.
there's like a lot of like overlap and intersections, which is kind of something I'm also want to push the digital space towards, moving more towards chants, not just for Wazchi, but for other different stuff eventually. And
Yeah.
they change over time depending on like what's most recently been outrageous, but there's a lot of like familiar formats. And there's also, I was looking at rhythms and the kind of how different chants might follow the same like melody or rhythm or whatever, and then that kind of being another way that they're connected, you know. I don't know. Yeah, that kind of thing.
That's cool. I think like it's cool that you can see them, these like chants like evolve like over time and like record that, and the internet like allows you to do that. Whereas like I guess you need to have these like know these facts if you're like in the protest. Only as someone who has been doing it for a while, but online you can learn this without, you know, having that knowledge, which is cool.
Yeah, and there's lots of things like with, I don't know, obviously it depends a lot on what's happening, but a lot of times you see people covering protests like on the news or there or whatnot, and you might hear like one chant, but hearing the different chants and like the different kind of thing, even though they all pretty much sound the same or are demanding like similar things, like I feel like that's really one way of understanding on the kind of unrest that like makes it actually make sense, you know. When you hear a lot of people chanting together for something, it's like very like straightforward, you know. It's not like, yeah, I mean there can be layers and there can be like different things, but it's also like just you hear what they saying, you know, and it's pretty, yeah, it kind of helps you understand or whatever, get a picture, obviously. So I wanted to talk kind of your reference, which was the Library of Missing Data Sets, which is a physical repository of those things that have been excluded in a society where so much is collected, as Mimi Anuoha describes it. And so it's kind of a exhibition or like a work or something that kind of brings together a bunch of excluded or neglected data sets into one physical space to be looked at as a collection, like in this kind of drawer, archive drawer format. So I was kind of curious in relation to your project, how you approached the idea of bringing missing data or like giving a voice to data. And I was wondering what you think is gained when you bring all this data into one space together, and then also what might be, you know, what's gained, what's lost, like what happens when you put stuff kind of in physical space together, you know, in that process.
Mhm. Yeah, I think it being in physical space was like a direct reaction to it being about internet shutdowns, and the fact that like you can't like the data I am using is from internetshutdowns.org, which is my poster just fell down, which is like I guess an online database that's interactive. But I felt that I had to bring it into something that you could maybe like hold or like experience in person, because it is about something that can't, it is about the lack of digital space. So it is more powerful, I feel, in physical space, if that makes sense.
Yeah, definitely.
And yeah, I think it was a way of thinking like, how can I record something that is like a blank in the internet, because you don't know, there's no like media from especially from Kashmir, or the media that is coming through is extremely censored, because journalists don't have access to the internet, and even like education systems are failing over there because of that. So how can you record something that is like, yeah, is not itself existing because of the censorship? And the reason I wanted it to all be in one place and be sort of bigger than me is kind of like when you first see it, you get really overwhelmed by like, oh my God, this is a lot of data. But because it is like textile, it's quite like approachable, and it's not like in the digital space you get like oversaturated with just information or images or anything, and you don't really know what you're looking at after a while. At least I experienced that. So I wanted it to be something that you could like you're obviously struck with it, but when you yourself go towards it and like feel it or touch it, like you can what's the word, examine like each data point at your own pace. And the way it is laid out, I feel that patterns kind of emerge. So you can tell that like, oh, in this date, like Independence Day, for example, on the 15th of August, like there would be more shutdowns that were like prevented in order to sort of prevent any uprisings or protests or anything. So yeah, and like this is harder to see, I feel, when the shutdowns are placed like geographically rather than with time. So the way I've placed them, you can tell like this state and this state was shut down at the same time. So there's something that's happening here that can be linked. So yeah, I don't know. Did I answer what you asked? Yeah.
I think it's really interesting because like how you see it linearly. I mean, in some ways, it's kind of this similar to the library of missing data sets, because it's like bringing your attention to those things that are missing, and it's like it like because of that physicalness of it, it makes you actually like think about it and not just feel like you have a full picture. Like, because I feel like that's one illusion of the internet. It's that like you feel like you see everything, you know, but it's like when you're looking at these and you're forced to like make the connections yourself between what those things mean. I think that's really like interesting how that works. I was gonna say something else. What was it? It was also in a way how it differs from the library of data sets, because here it's like a drawer, so it's very much like closed, but yours is kind of like outward facing in terms of like being a textile. So I'm wondering if that's something that you thought about, or if that's something that just came with the medium, was kind of, it's like almost like decorative. Well, it's not decorative, it's like part of what it is, right? But it's kind of like as a medium, it's always like something that's shown, I guess, like it's very open, kind of unlike these drawers like that. So I'm wondering if that idea of archiving in that way was something that you thought about.
Yeah, so the format kind of came about because when I was researching about this, I looked at how people were able to communicate to anybody in Kashmir because it was like the state was shut down for over a year. So it was basically a communication blockade that was really, really restrictive. And so people would send messages from outside of Kashmir and outside of India through like to like news channels that were playing Kashmiri news channels, and they would like repeat on the there would be like a banner on the bottom that would sort of go around, and those messages would repeat there. But again, that was like a one-sided communication, right? So I started to make like I was like, how can I use this format of like information moving across to sort of translate data or like collect information. So that's how this like format of like cloth or like something rolled up kind of came about, because I feel like there's uh, the way that it is exhibited, there's a sort of what's the word? Not drama, but like a sort of like performative aspect when you like unroll it. Um, like something is like coming, or like you're like expecting something. But yeah, and like with Mimi, oh, I can't say her name as well. With Mimi Onuoha's work, I feel that she also had this quote or this another piece related to this one where she says like, what is missing is still there. And it's like very simple but quite powerful, I feel. And that sort of influenced what I was trying to do greatly, to make a point that these voices are being censored. So how can you like raise awareness about them? But yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. The next reference of yours that I wanted to ask you about was Paul Sharad's paper, which is called Following the Map, a post-colonial unpacking of a Kashmir shawl. Because it's like saying that it's looking at the kind of linguistic links between narrative and weaving, and then looking also at the shawl as a self-evident surface. So like containing a lot, and also in its materiality, which I think connects to what we were just talking about a little bit in like how it unrolls and that kind of thing, as well as like, because I was really interested how he spoke about the materiality and like the idea of like self-sufficiency. And he says it kind of affirms the importance of intimacy of local knowledge and the richness of lived detail. So I was curious, in relation to your project, as someone weaving kind of from a distance and across a non-existent digital space, or like an existing but like inaccessible, it basically is like, how does this materiality and richness that is supposedly like the lived richness, how does it translate across to you and into the materiality of what you've made, given the context of like the internet shutdowns and stuff like that, you know? I mean, it was just interesting to me because obviously the Kashmir shawl that they're looking at, it has this like rich kind of detail, and I feel like that's kind of in contrast to how yours has come out, but obviously it's a completely different context. So I was just interested how you, yeah, how does that materiality translate?
Yeah, so mine is like it's kind of incomplete at the moment because I feel that I'm not kind of comfortable to make a lot of these embroideries when I haven't experienced a shutdown entirely myself, just very uh a very like subdued version of it where like networks were like affected at a protest. But yeah, so the I decided to like machine embroider the kind of base of this tapestry that's kind of done and like designed, so that it's just because I guess I'm archiving like years of data from like 2012. So I equated like one year to like 2 meters of cloth, and then was able to like then place dates on top and then embroider that. But on top, I plan to like hand embroider sort of contextual things through like imagery or iconography, which
Right.
sort of uh, Paul Shara's reference really helped me kind of realize, and the people I spoke to who said that contextualizing these beyond statistics is really important, because it's like actual people whose lives are being affected, you know. And that's something I want to do by talking to more people and then commissioning artists and people who have experienced these. And it can be like phrases or just drawings or icons that then I will embroider on top. And also I can like put online, which is in contrast to shutdowns, but at least people around who can access the internet can embroider from their own homes, and it doesn't have to exist as just one big piece of embroidery that I have. So in a way, the protest kind of spreads, and you can put it up in your window, you know, this piece of cloth. Whereas the one that I've built kind of acts as like something you can carry to a rally, set it up, and like do it in person and have other people join because of the scale. Yeah, and I think his paper also made me think about the kind of gaze that I'm making this in and also presenting it in. So I knew from the beginning that this is like an object that can't really exist in a gallery setting, because of like how it works. And I read this his quote that kind of said that in galleries objects are frozen in time and like abstracted from their stories, despite the best efforts of modern curatorial practice, which I totally agree with. So yeah, and to do it in textile, I felt like was taking it away from like data visualizations you see online, which I really like clean and kind of erase a lot of like the bias or the procedures that go in filtering all this information, you know. So I feel like this was maybe a more transparent way and maybe a more accessible way of reading something that is such a big database. Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense. And I think that the idea of kind of going from this kind of thing that is just how you have it now, and then adding that more kind of richness of whatever, what does it say? Richness of local knowledge and that kind of thing, like moving into it, like combining those things, that makes a lot of sense. Like in terms of this reference and in your project, like kind of makes them connect along. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, I was also kind of told that I should probably increase the scale of what I'm doing, and that was like feedback I got. And I hope to do it maybe not in the way of physically increasing just this one piece of that I've built, but hopefully if more people do it, then it becomes something beyond just like my bubble or yeah. So I was thinking about like the AIDS quilt and how people would make their own quilt for somebody in their family that has passed away, and then would send it to this organization that then would stitch it together. And then you have this huge, it was kind of, I guess, because each panel was the size of, what is it called, like a grave. So it was like it was like the biggest textile like collective project that I think has happened in history.
Wow.
And it was so powerful because it was laid out and people would walk around and see all of these people being commemorated and celebrated, but also raising awareness about something that was so badly dealt with. So yeah, something along those lines where people can make this in about their own stories about internet shutdown and be able to exhibit that wherever.
Yeah,
So,
that makes a lot of sense. Like the idea of like including other people, it's like building that kind of collective memory, because that is one of the things that he was talking about in another bit of it that I read, which was about like how maps are. I mean, I know yours is it's a different kind of map, but it's still a map in a way of those things, and it's like a map is like somehow like a culmination of all of those other maps that came and all of those other experiences that came before. So it makes a lot of sense to like move in that collective direction. Coming from, yeah, definitely.
Cool. On the same topic of archiving, I wanted to talk to you about your next reference, which is a quote by Ida C. Benedetto. So she's an experienced designer whose practice surrounds adventure and play. And the quote was taken from an interview that was called "What is an Archive For?" And it talks about, like, I guess, switching between mediums to realize that this information is to experience this information in different ways. And I feel that this kind of relates to both of our projects, where we are taking like data or things that already exist and then making an alternate way of perceiving them. And I know that you've been using like reso printing a lot in your whole process, and with that comes like a color and sort of content restriction. So I was compared to like the website you're building, so it's like contrasting. So I was like wondering how you find it constantly shifting between like print and the online, and kind of with limitations, how does that work, and do these two like operate separately, or yeah?
Yeah, I think it was something that I was experimenting with a lot. So I'm not sure if I have like defined conclusions, but it was definitely inspired by this quote in some ways, or this is one way that it was kind of, what's the word, articulated that made sense to me, which is like transmuting it and allowing it to change forms and creating different possibilities. So with most of the resource stuff that I was doing, it was kind of about distilling sentiments in a similar way to how I was trying to do when I chopped up the sound, to kind of make it so that you remember. It's like kind of more it's because, okay, well, so I started from a point of like videos that was circulating, and there's a lot going on. Some of them might be like 20 minutes, 30 minutes, like Instagram lives and that kind of thing, where it's like a lot of digital. And it was kind of what you were saying earlier, where it's like there's so much information online that you kind of you can't, it doesn't invite you to like listen or look closer in a way. So with what I was doing with the sound is taking these videos and scraping them so that it was just mostly sound, although I did use the videos in a few different ways, like as like a visual element to it. It was kind of about distilling it down to like something that's maybe more symbolic, but also somehow more, but invites more like material engagement, as opposed to like just looking, if you're looking a video like frame by frame, like trying to look at what is happening, you might tune out in some other ways, you know, whereas with the sound, it kind of forces you to listen closer and try to understand what's going on, even if it might be really clear, like you hear different things going through. And with the reso printing, I think it was actually a similar kind of thing, but from a different medium. So that was more for taking tweets, other content that was digital, like that emerged digitally, and to kind of archive it and put them side by side. Because I don't know how you feel about this, but I feel like a lot of the time with these kind of digital things that circulates, it's like at the end of it, what do you have left? Because it's going to be kind of, everything's kind of going on top of each other, and stuff might be like always there, but it's like kind of not collected. So what I was trying to do was kind of bring these things together, put them side by side in a format that forces you to like read them, as opposed to kind of just like scrolling through them, or like command Fing them, or like just like liking a meme and then not seeing it again. So I don't know, with it was definitely about kind of, with both of them, it was about playing with how you engage with the material. Wasn't anything crazy. It was just like, let me change its format so that you think a little bit more about what you're looking at. And you kind of see the sentiment there and not just kind of quickly. And I mean, I liked it as a document of kind of what's going on, was like how to understand it from afar. It's like you could read the articles, you can do the other stuff. That obviously is like helps and gives you like an in-depth view if you watch all these videos, but also like you can tell from sound, you can tell from memes. I thought that was like an interesting digital language that could be explored. So yeah, that's what I was kind of getting at. And I think it is really related to your project and the earlier reference, the missing data sets thing, where it's like by putting them all together in a physical space, like you kind of ask different questions, or you invite like a different viewing of those things. And I was hoping that I could bring out kind of what Paul Sharad was talking about, which was this kind of like local knowledge kind of element to it, where it's like I was just printing it, but it was stuff other people had created. And it's kind of a similar idea of what you were saying, which is like if you see these statistics on the internet, like you don't get people's experiences, you just get like information, which is obviously helpful. But you know, I think part of what we're both doing was kind of trying to go a little bit further than that and like look at the material itself or whatever. Yeah, that kind of thing.
Yeah, I think it's cool to have something at the end of your project. You know, like I always feel like if I make a video, I don't know, although it is something, I just don't feel the same as I feel if I made something I can maybe like a pot, you know. So it's cool to have something. And I was talking to my dad about this the other day, where he was like, you know, we take so many pictures and they're all there, but like, you know, when they get deleted, like what happens? Because you can just, when you take film, you just put it in your cupboard for a bit and it's all arranged, and then you come and see it in a year and you're like, wow, you know, this happened. But like it doesn't have the same like, I don't know, like pull, what's the like, I don't know, the connection or something like that to it, which is interesting. And yeah, I also, while reading the interview, she was like talking about different ways of listening, and she was like, there's like focused listening where you're like actively like looking for something, and there's like expansive listening where you're like, you have like a starting point and you're just like, okay, I'm listening, I'm exploring. So I think it's like maybe what you're doing is like with the reso, especially even with your website, is like, I guess, creating that atmosphere to like focus, to like, what's the word, like listen about being focused, which is cool. So,
yeah, I think it's like, yeah, it's just things are sometimes like overwhelming. So like I think like being able to focus on like with sound, it's like multiple things could be happening at a time, but it's like you can't like scroll through it, you know, like you have to listen. So I think, yeah, definitely. And like, I mean, I would, yeah, definitely agree with what you were saying. Like I really like appreciate like the digital stuff, because like everything moves so quickly and like it can like reach so many people. But like at the end, if we're thinking about memory, I think it's important for it to take some material forms, like whatever that is. Like even like, yeah, I don't know. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's nice to have a break from that. I guess like my project is kind of like a big scroll, you know, this has the same like way you read stuff, which I've now realized. But you can pack it up, you know, you're like, this is a lot right now. So, but yours, like having a book is like a good break from like that kind of processing of anything where you have to like turn the page and you have like feel like you can create boundaries with that kind of information, you know, you're like, I've had it. So yeah, that's cool.
Definitely. I think it needs more work, but like it was an interesting like thing to play with, because then there's lots of questions like, where do you draw the boundaries and that kind of thing. It's like, what am I putting in here and what am I not? And it's a whole other thing, which is like very like, I don't know, I'm not sure. I feel like I've just like started doing stuff, and then I'm just kind of like, I don't know. But it's a interesting experiment. I think it's one of those things that like kind of in the same way that the textile could be like expanded to include different voices and that kind of thing. Like it would be really good for this one if it was kind of a series and not just one publication. So maybe in the future. Yeah.
Cool. Nice. Okay, on to your next one. So this reference is called Sound Collage as Political Chronic by Henrique Souza Lima. Probably saying that wrong. So Lima is I think, sound historian or music historian. And they present a sound collage made from clippings of the word in spite or despite. So
Yeah.
in various instances of Brazilian pop music. So in a way, and a famous song called "In Spite of You." That's a really iconic protest song. So I guess by comparing the rest of the spite in despite with that spite is like the creating like an intertextual relationship and seeing like how this word has evolved, I guess, in through sound, and sound being your main medium. I think that's like a direct link there. I think through this like collaging, they've like encoded sounds of protest and dissent the same way I guess you are trying to do, and with the like tracks you've made and like crowdsourced, I guess. So I wanted to ask, like, did you do this for like protests to pass through undetected, like in the mainstream, or is it more to like be able to raise awareness in a format that is more accessible if you're not there physically for the protests? So yeah.
I don't know, but I think it's kind of, yeah, with this one, what I thought was really interesting is kind of like how it's embedded but like undetected unless you kind of know, which is kind of cool. And then with the sounds that I made, like the sample pack and how I wanted people to use them, like I tried to keep it open just to see what emerged, like how people want to use them. I mean, the thing is, like, some of them is just sound collages of these sounds that really is kind of like an exercise in kind of like trying to like put yourself in there and try to like experience it and like project how you feel onto these sounds, you know? So like some people kind of approached it in that way. Other people took like just a portion or like a melody or like a few drums and kind of looped that and then created like completely different, or not, like from other completely different sounds around it. So some of those ones, like Taruk's one, for example, like he made this beat and then he just had the melody kind of embedded in it. I thought that was kind of a really interesting way of encoding it into that. And it's kind of like the same thing of like sampling, because the recording that I chopped, that he put into the thing, is a bunch of musicians playing a song from other musicians. So it's kind of like, I guess the way I looked at it was like the digital equivalent to kind of playing those songs. Like if you were there, you might play songs like protest songs or whatever, you know, you might play songs that has those connotations, like these Apesar songs, which is like where people have kind of subtly included it in the meaning of the song. It's like people would do that and they would play it in an instrument, and that would be kind of a performance of a protest. And this is kind of the same thing in some ways, where it's like you digitally kind of sample it and perform it to kind of show solidarity. So in some ways it's not even about like the sound itself, and it's not like you hear the sound and then, sorry, someone's calling me. It's not like you hear the sound and you go like, oh man, I'm remembering what happened in Boğaziçi right now. Like, unless some people made it like that, like they put the chant in it. So like you hear the chants in the song and it's kind of like you, it's like a reminder, you know? But other times it's just like the fact that they used it is kind of like a symbolic kind of solidarity thing. And then me putting all of those submissions into a broadcast and into a website, it's like more about trying to build a network instead of actually like the outcome itself. So I mean, it's both, I guess. I was kind of looking at both, I guess. But yeah, I was interested in the kind of intertextual relationship of these sounds and just trying to like, yeah, unify people through that.
Yeah, I guess it relates with what you were talking about in the beginning of like these chants being like from old protests and then being used in like a different context with like things changed. But yeah, I think it's interesting that how you are like what's the word, like I'm not understanding, but like do like about performing protest online, like how you're what's the word, like how you're dealing with it, I guess. Like with what you're making, like I wouldn't have thought of that myself. So that's like a cool way to approach it. A bit performance, you know, because I
Yeah.
always feel like that needs like, to me it's very like somebody needs to be there, like a body needs to be there or something. But this is really cool, like, and in a way it's like definitely making things more accessible. So yeah.
Yeah,
That's
I think part of the nature of like what I was looking at also was like there was lots of like protests in solidarity from like Berlin and other cities with like lots of people, you know, who went to that university maybe in the past or something like that. And also like trying to look at how it connects to other things that like I kind of wanted to do it. And also like there's always like one or two kind of protest songs that gets made whenever there's like a big one in Turkey, you know, so people were already doing it. I was just kind of taking it in like a more sampling direction and trying to like invite more people to do it and put their hands into it who otherwise might not have, which I thought, yeah, just because I wanted to do it, but I wanted other people to do it as well. But like, what was it? There was one other thing I was gonna say, which was just like, yeah, I don't know. But yeah.
well, when you send these to like people like as samples, did you have to like, did they ask you about like what this protest is and like what, like in a way like like are you having to tell them and they're like learning from experience?
Yeah. I mostly was telling people like, because a lot of the people so far have been people who don't necessarily know, but I'm also trying to like extend it to people who's actually been there and that kind of thing as well. But yeah, in the process I was explaining a lot. I mean, I would hope that kind of the website does more like self-explaining through the material, you know, eventually.
Yeah.
Right now I'm still kind of getting it up there, if that makes sense. But yeah, it's one thing I noticed is kind of like at the end, it's like a lot of the conversations that you have is like sometimes as interesting as where you're trying to make, you know, for me at least.
Definitely.
And I know you did lots of interviews and stuff, so I'm sure that's true for your project as well. It's like a lot of it was like building a network and stuff.
Yeah, I think like not like, because I don't really have knowledge about what I was researching in, it was like really important. I spoke to people that were doing research and kind of gave me more context of like how to even visualize something that like is that like you think of as a blank. Because I asked them like how did they actually shut the internet down? Like this will help me like think about how I could draw it, or like, yeah. And they were just like, oh yeah, it's also called kill switch because it's a switch. Usually that's the way things are shut off. So it's like that literal, I guess. So yeah, I think in the conversations I had definitely add to the outcome themselves. And yeah, it's like that, like now I feel like I can, if people ask me questions because of those conversations, I can explain a lot of things. So I'm there as well to like the way you are having to explain when you send in a sample, like the conversations I had with people even around me and like what they compared this textile to other textiles was also like really interesting. And that's how I found out about the AIDS quilt. So yeah, I think, yeah, I totally agree with that. Yeah.
Yeah. So I wanted to ask you about the last one, your third reference, which is knit to defense, pearl to control. So it's an animation that kind of explores the connotations and encoded meanings of knitting, but also like war images and imagery, and the kind of relationship between those different things, like that kind of knit for defense movement, which I know was like for like soldiers in World War II, and like the symbolic importance of it as well. So like, speaking of kind of like encoding and trying to like, yeah, I guess it's just kind of in what ways, I want to ask just what are the ways that the context and the meanings of your protests are encoded in the outcome. So kind of, I guess, in a similar vein to what I was asking before about like the materiality of it, is like at the what else is encoded? I guess, is it parts of these conversations as well that comes together in the outcome? Is the other things? I don't know. That's the kind of question I want to ask.
Mm.
Like, what comes through in the outcome as well? Like,
That's a good question. The thing is, I always am trying to get more and more to come out, but right now I feel like it's quite minimal and needs a lot of work. But right now it's like a lot of like technical details come in, because that's like data that's very easily translatable, because it's like points. So like the duration of each shutdown, the state, and then the district within the state that it happened in. And then what else? The number of hours. So I've done it in days. So if it crosses one square, that means it's something beyond 24 hours. And like in a way, like, yes, you need to, the reason I learned about and the kind of shutdown, whether it was like preventative, like in apprehension of something going to happen, or like a protest already happened, or unrest happened and then they switched the internet off. But like with things to like, with patterns to look out, I kind of learned only through the conversations I had, because it's like reactive shutdowns are usually very short, but preventative ones are usually very long. So when there's a reactive shutdown that is long, I feel like that's like something I would be like, oh, what's happened over here, you know? So it's like, I guess when you put them together and you physically see like with symbols that this is happening, I feel like there's some, you're kind of more inquisitive about it, maybe. I don't know if that's true, but you kind of want to know that, hey, what does this mean? And the cause, I'm trying to have it come through like these like cultural references. Like right now I was embroidering like a red bird for Kashmir, which is like a kind of symbol in the largest scale of like bringing attention to the sort of human rights violations that occur there every day, and not just the internet blockade. And kind of talking about their right to self-determination. So yeah, it's like the next step is to kind of culturally more provide more of a context and more of a story, and like with talking to people, maybe it's like a slogan that they've been using that can be embroidered on top in that area, you know. So yeah, I think that's to figure out. And also I think with the way it is with the material, it kind of shows the like the labor that went into it. Because I spent like I don't know how long, and I feel like for me it was like joining these different pieces of time by like hand sewing them was like just felt quite like I don't know, felt kind of important that it was this way, rather than it being mechanized. And that kind of is interesting with like Kat Maza's reference, because she like created a software called Knitoscope, where she then took like pictures taken through drones and then converted them into knits, so like pixels and each stitch, which I found really interesting. And it like shows the relationship between like, I guess, labor and like how like women at home were knitting for like men at war, and that labor was I guess like unspoken, unpaid, informal. So that was interesting as well.
yeah.
Yeah.
And part of it, I remember that she also said was that by the time that like World War II was around, they had lots of like already like manufacturing and that kind of thing for these sweaters or whatever to keep the soldiers warm. And so like a lot of the labor was, even though it was obviously like real labor, like it was more kind of symbolic than actually like functionally keeping them warm, you know, which is I think kind of a good connection to your project as well, in terms of like just being like um symbolic, and also like an archive of like giving attention to this absence of of like kind of internet, you know, or of data, or of like recognition of these things. Because I remember you were telling me a while back as well, like lots of times people think it's just like a symptom of like infrastructure or that kind of thing, instead of like a intentional shutdown. So to bring it together into that piece, I think really calls attention to the kind of, you know, like the intention of the shutdown, and like makes you question why it is, you know, in different times.
Yeah. One of the people I spoke to, Rohini Lakshane from like the Bachao project, she was saying that like a lot of people think about like conflict zones as like being not in control. So they always think about internet shutdowns being like the like the end, what's the like the last thing that people would do, you know, when there's something that's totally out of control. But that's not true. Most shutdowns are preventative. So they are done kind of waiting for something to happen, whether that might or not. And it's also not true looking at like the places that shutdowns happen in, that they are mostly happening in like at the time of conflict, you know, like the reasons given for them are to prevent like misinformation and hate speech in these conflict zones, or like in times of conflict, but it's not necessary that they're deployed at that time, which is where it gets like it's a political move, you know.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think for an object to stand and be like similar to the first reference of the missing data sets, to be like, hey, this exists, like, you know, I think that's why it looks like what it looks like, I guess. But it was definitely like, and it just constantly seeing what works and what doesn't work. And when I was putting it together, a lot of people said that, hey, it looks like a quilt, you know, because of the panels joined together. And I thought that was really cool as well, that it is kind of in a way weird that it looks like a comforting object. So yeah, that was interesting.
Yeah. And also, yeah, speaking about like the encoded meanings, it's like also like what you were saying earlier about the kind of the other what's it called, like the encoded the things, the histories, like the map thing, like this kind of the fact that you've chosen to work in textile as well, I think brings a lot of you know, these references that we've talked about, like as kind of embedded in the object that you're making, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I want to definitely like zone in on specific embroidery techniques. I think just the time frame I've been working in has
Yeah.
been a bit mad to like be able to do that, because it's something that takes so long. And so the machine embroidery was like what I could use at the time. But yeah, I think it's
Yeah.
definitely moving um, forward to see like what else I can do, because I don't want it to look like quite a clinical object, but like as something that is like made by someone. So yeah.
Yeah, definitely. I think, yeah, I think it makes a lot of sense, like the way that your project is moving forward, especially looking at all these references and stuff.
Mm. Yeah, you too. But yeah,
Um,
it's that.
all right, cool. Well,
Good
uh,
chat.
this has been In Conversation, Archiving and Digital Space. I'm Sam,
And
and
I'm Aarushi.
thanks, guys.
Thanks for watching. Bye.
Bye.
Hi, I'm Aarushi. Hi, I'm Aarushi.
better let me see you Jew. You 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 better let me see you Jew.
flashing lights.
We have here nitric acid, glycerine, and a special mixture of my own.
Don't you run when you hear the sirens coming. When you hear the sirens coming, you better not run, cause the sirens are coming for you. What have you done? You went to school that day. It was a bit late, but it was a Monday. Kept at the class for answering back. You apologise and ain't harming that. What have you done? There's no need to run. If you've done nothing wrong, blue lights will just pass you by.
Have here acid.
Don't climb into your right, drugs and violence into your left. People with headphones plugged in the auditory subconscious waves you accept. You're sitting on the floor back home. Say you want to cheat, answer your phone. Pause the poison to answer his message. Your voice sounds rushed, feels for his adolescence. What have you done? There's no need to run. If you've done nothing wrong, blue lights will just pass by.
We have here nitric acid, glycerine, and a special mixture of my own.
Tall black shadow as you're getting off the bus. Shadow shows no emotion, so what's even the fuss? But the face of your boy casts a darker picture of the red-handed act. He's gonna whisper. Look good, I'm sorry, cause I know you got my back. He was running, I couldn't think I had to get out of that. Not long ago, you were running to the shook ones. Now this really is part two, cause you're the shook one. Hands to the tool as you question your friendship. Cause man like you gonna make me a convict. Never love a felon when I've done nothing wrong. Blood on my hands, but I don't know where it's from. You got blood on your hands, but you don't know where it's from. You better run when you hear the sirens coming. When you hear the sirens coming, better run when you hear the sirens coming, cause they will be coming for you. Run when you hear the sirens coming, better run when you hear the sirens coming. When you hear the sirens coming, the blue lights are coming for you. What have you done? There's no need to run. If you've done nothing wrong, blue lights will just pass by. Don't you run when you hear the sirens coming. Don't you run when you hear the sirens coming. What have you done? Don't you run. Don't you run. Don't you run when you hear the sirens coming.
We have here nitric acid, glycerine, and a special mixture of my own.
Hi, I'm Aarushi, and today I'm in conversation with Sam, and we're going to talk about archiving and digital space with respect to like both of our projects. So my project is called Sedition, and it acts as a growing archive on textile, where I record internet shutdowns in India district-wise. And I did this after analyzing open source data